Does faith-based healing still exist today? There's people that say yes, and there are people that say no. And is it possible that you actually, by just praying, God could heal you? Do you believe in those television big kind of campaigns that they say, come here and you'll be healed now, and all that kind of stuff? And some of you will be saying that is baloney, some of you saying that is real, and some of you are saying, I want to know more. And today, I want you to know more. Because first, when I heard about this, I was like, I'm not sure about this because I've heard both sides. But then when I heard Dr. Denard Fobbs' story, it touched my life in such a way that I want to change and apply that to my own life for what he did. And it turned out what looked like a curse became a blessing. With me is Dr. Denard Fobbs, a gynecologist from Fresno. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be
While
here.
you were finding out that you had cancer, at the same time your son was deployed to Iraq.
That's right.
How did you handle that?
Quietly.
Quietly?
Quietly, because I had a whole family, both a nuclear family, expanded family, church family, who were all focused on him and his deployment, praying for him, concerned about him, and I must say worried about him. And I quietly handled it by not telling a soul.
No, not even your wife?
Not a word, especially my wife.
Nobody?
She was kind of overwhelmed with him being deployed to Iraq in the Marines. And so I felt like the best thing to do at this time was to just work on this, handle this, focus on him. And so I didn't tell a word.
You didn't say anything?
No.
So your son is in Iraq.
Right.
Is there fear in you every day to get that devastated knock on the door or a phone call?
The whole point I think about, and this goes towards the healing, it all attaches or comes together at some point. But no, my methodology, my thinking, my plan from the beginning was to say no to fear and to learn to take the things I learned about God and put them into play, where the rubber meets the road, make them work, make them real. I'd spent 15 years in Bible study fellowships. I'd been at my church for 10 years or 12 years, and I knew what God had to say about these matters, so I decided that it's time to do it. And so I decided instead of worry, fear, or any of those things, that I would apply myself to a close and passionate pursuing of God's face in a way I'd never done before, and that we would do the kind of things that God said you can ask him to do. And I asked God to protect my son at first, then I asked him to protect my son's platoon, and I said, what I'll do is I will stay in your face and I will trust you and I'll believe you and I will passionately.
But how do you do that? Because it's so easy to say, God, protect my son, and then just walk out the door.
What's not easy, you're right, what's not easy to do is to start doing what I thought God really has called us to do, which is to learn to sit still and to abide in him and to have a loving, close relationship that is time intensive, that is focus intensive, that is simply intensive. And so when I did this, it was almost like a bargain. I said, well, Lord, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend an hour every morning, an hour every evening, and I'm just going to stay in your face, and we're going to know each other. We're going to learn each other. We're going to communicate. I'm going to mostly shut up, and I'm going to learn to just stay in your environment. And that's what I did. I had a little background in meditation going all the way back to college.
That's hard to do, though, because I did that only once like that, and I said, for years wanted to spend 4 hours with God. So I went to the lake, brought all my study material, brought everything I could think of to keep me busy, sat at the lake, and then I heard the Lord so clearly say, put it away. This is not about studying, this is not about working. This is about quality time. And I'm sitting there on this picnic bench saying, well, there we are. Now what? And just sat there. And then at the end, I started taking a walk. And I did not make it 4 hours. I only made it 3.
That's good enough.
And I walked. And while I'm walking there, I don't know where it came from, but there was all this inside of me. And I was forgiving one person after another for like an hour. I'm like, but how do you do that on a daily basis? Did you experience
Well, first of all,
that?
I thank you for saying what you just said, because you started at the beginning. And the beginning is you can't really have much of an intimate closeness and communing in God's atmosphere without forgiving. So you started at the beginning, from ground zero. You have to forgive first. There are techniques to meditation, to answer the second question. And you have to learn the techniques, and you have to allow those techniques to work themselves in and to spend the time. And they are ancient. Most of these techniques go back hundreds and hundreds of years. They come from every discipline. They come from Buddhism, they come from Taoism, they come from Christianity, but they're just techniques. The process that I engaged in was 110% Christian, because all the principles are Christian, and all the focus and all the ideas and all the thoughts and all the visions are Christian. So that was my deal with God, is that I would spend my hour morning, hour in the evening, and I would stay in your face, and you would give me perfect peace, and you'll protect my son.
Did you have that peace immediately?
Perfect peace.
Wow.
Perfect peace.
You know, it sounds ridiculous me saying that, but a thought, especially as a doctor, being so busy, that comes to mind is, where do you find the time?
You make the time.
You make
you don't. You do have to find and make the time. No one will give you the time. Certainly, Satan does not want you to have the time. So everything he can put in your way to not have the time, he will do that. And then you have to resist, and you have to push back, and you have to make the time, because that is what God wants you to do.
Wow. Now, did your son survive Iraq?
Well, not only did my son survive, and I'm really happy to say this, but he had the only Marine expeditionary platoon that's ever served in that arena, where no one was injured, no one was killed. Wow. It was quite remarkable.
Now, wasn't it something, didn't God tell you, don't just pray for your son?
At first I was praying for just my son. You know, that's what we do. We limit God because we have these little small brains that forget that God is God and we're not. And so after doing that for a while, God told me, you know, what are you doing? Open yourself up to greater and larger things. And he taught me some things and reminded me of some things I'd never embraced much before, like angels. And he reminded me you can surround their whole platoon with a platoon of angels. And so I had visions that I'd never thought of and never studied and never imagined before, and they were just given to me, and I just stayed with them. And so you're spending that time, that's what you're doing, you're spending that time exploring and living and dwelling in those visions and those ideas that God gives you.
Wow. So you basically committed. Didn't you say
commitment.
something like,
it was
I
a
made
deal.
a contract with God?
It was a contract.
I will
this
pray.
is what I do, and this is what you do. You can do that.
Does it work like that with God usually?
It does, I think.
Okay. So,
especially when that contract is according to the plan of obedience he's already given you.
That's a good way to put it. That's a good way
That's
to
why
put
it works, is because he really gave us that, you know, the ideas for that.
Yeah.
And we're just saying, okay, I'm going to do it.
Wow. So stay with me for a moment.
Okay.
And there's a lot more, because when Dr. Fobbs really put his son first, he put himself with cancer behind. What happened? Stay tuned. There are many that have questions, spiritual questions, and would like to have the answers to that. And we have created something for you specifically for that. On our website, you just check on it, and it has this big sign up that says God Questions. All you have to do is just to go online and ask us your questions, and we are so excited to answer those to you, to help you, to guide you, and to give you some direction in the help that you need. Or if you'd like to ask us by phone, that will work as well. 855-515-5550, or go to that website, barbtv.org. God Questions. Dr. Fobbs is with me, and he believes in faith-based healing. And the question is, do you? He started praying and meditating on God's word and ignored his own cancer and focused completely on the needs from others. But was that the answer for him that moment? You focused completely on your son comes safely back. And the first dying question I have for you is, once your son were back, did you keep that closeness with God?
That's a real difficult question because I don't have the answer I'd like to give you. I continued to pray, I continued to go to church, but I was not able to continue the extreme intensity and focus that I was doing when he was in Iraq.
There was not as much at stake.
That's right.
Yeah, it changed.
That's right.
Now, you had been hiding your cancer, you had been ignoring your cancer, and then you ended up in the ER.
Right.
And that turned out devastating. Can you tell me about that?
It was humbling. I had
as a doctor, especially.
As a doctor, since nothing had become of this cancer, everything had remained quiet the entire time he was in
How long
Iraq.
was that time?
5 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I was basically at that point forgetting about it. But what happened was after he got back, after everything started back to normal, after my prayer life became a more normalized prayer life, which is to say weaker, then things started happening, and the tumor started growing. And I knew it, but I was in a deep, deep state of denial for a while.
As a doctor?
As a doctor, it's easy to be in a deep state of denial, especially as one had experienced what can happen that was positive, and then see it kind of slowly drifting away and not wanting to admit it. Doctors are human first.
Yeah, it's true. So you are there, and they find a tumor inside of you, a 14-inch.
14 centimeter. Which is not quite as big as 14 inch, but it's the size of a nice California cantaloupe.
Cantaloupe, a cantaloupe. So what was next?
The next was chemotherapy.
And an angry wife.
Well, she was very disturbed.
Yeah,
yeah,
because you hid this for 5 years.
Yeah.
So
she was very disturbed, and everybody was disturbed. But we did the chemo, and the chemo worked to a point. And to a point, what I mean is that I had been in terrific pain, and had this huge mass. And the pain got better, and the mass shrunk about halfway. So it was still about the size of a fist rather than a cantaloupe.
Right.
But after that, it didn't shrink anymore.
So how many cycles of chemo did you go through?
6 cycles.
That's pretty sick.
That's the whole
I've heard the
routine.
more chemo, the worse it gets, basically. Now, I'm not hearing you say, I turn to God back this moment. I'm not hearing you talk about faith-based healing. You went to the medical world.
We haven't gotten there yet. That's right. Things were so bad. And you have to remember, I never turned away from God. I just lost my intensity and focus. Because that intensity and focus was son-focused, not me.
Right.
And so when this happened, it got bad and then improved a bit, but did not improve enough to be even remotely a cure or a satisfactory position. I got my consultation at Stanford. They recommended a stem cell transplant.
And what is that?
And where they harvest stem cells from either yourself or preferably somebody else who doesn't have cancer and give you about 10 times more chemotherapy, and then they hope that when they give you some stem cells back, it'll rescue your bone marrow so you don't die. That wasn't terribly attractive to me, but I did consider it, and fortunately while I was there, that's when very, very clearly God really spoke to me literally during the consult and just basically clearly told me I did not have to do the stem cell transplant, that I could go back to the same method of dwelling and living and abiding in Him that I had done with my son, only this time for me, which I'd never done, and I'd be healed.
How did you know it was God talking to you that moment?
Well, because I've never heard that voice before, and you know, God, you know, this is hard to describe because when in my former life, if somebody said God spoke to him, I would think they were a little nuts.
Yeah.
But when God speaks, it comes from the inside. It like comes from the bone out, as opposed to somewhere out here and hitting you. You know to the bone. Right. And the peace that comes with that is overwhelming. It's just overwhelming peace. That's the best I can describe it.
So what did you tell the doctors? No, thank you?
I said thanks, but no thanks.
How did they take that?
It didn't go over all that well.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you go from there? I'll see you later if I still need you?
I told them that my messaging has been to pray and to abide in God like I knew how to do once upon a time. So I had a pretty good idea about how to do that, even though I'd never done it for myself. It's always been intercessory. And I told them I would get my every 4 months CT PET scans and show them how God is working.
So you went back to your prayer life. The doctors thought you were nuts.
A bit nuts.
Yeah, and then what happened?
First CT PET scan, the fist tumor, and also little satellites. The little satellites were gone. The big tumor broke up into little pieces. And then the next 4 months, it was just all gone.
All gone, completely gone. God completely healed
Just
you.
completely, yeah.
So, and then of course the question I want to ask you right now, what is your prayer life like now?
It's a lot like that now, only not quite as long all the time.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
because God didn't tell me when I could stop. I wish He had, so I could just kind of relax. But He didn't tell me I could just stop and, whatever, you're done.
Right.
He didn't tell me that.
So, wow, looking back at this experience, what would you say to the viewer right now?
I would say,
for those that have serious sicknesses, I've had friends actually that truly faith-based said, I have Parkinson's, I'm stopping all my medications,
yeah.
done, and that are just sick as can be. So
Right.
what would you tell to a person like that?
That's a hard question. I would first tell them, you have to pray, you have to commune with God. You have to remember, in part, at least some of what I did was directly informed by God. But I would say that the second part, though, is that when I entered into this practice, it's something that anybody can do. Because anybody with a Christ-based background knows something about how to pray. They know what the Lord says about healing. And He says He wants to heal you. So He's got the power, He wants to heal you. And so you have to put yourself in a place for Him to work.
That's true.
And prayer, and this kind of prayer is different from typical prayer for this and prayer for that. It's a prayer life where you're into closeness with God, not really asking for anything except all that He has. That just happens to include healing.
Wow.
He wants to give you all that He has.
I want to ask you about some of those techniques in a minute, because I remember sitting there on that bench saying, now what, and it worked through, but then why did I not go back to that? I want it, but it's the commitment of time and putting God first. Yeah. Why are we so bad at that when we know that's most important? And Dr. Fobbs will share a little bit about what he does today and how he actually helps his patients with that as well, and that he has some classes that could be attended in how to help with that. Stay tuned.
Barb TV is building on a fantastic community of followers who love the show, love all the messages that Barb's bringing and all of her guests. Follow us on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/BarbTV and just like the segments, like the shows, so we know the content that you want to hear from us. Barb TV will make a big impact on your life, so go to facebook.com/BarbTV.
What was your day like today? Each day can be a challenge and each day can be excitement. And the Barb Marshall Show wants to be there for you, wants to help you no matter how you feel, what you're doing, or what is going on in your life. Could you check us out and find out more about us? barbtv.org, or go to us and call us so we can pray with you for your needs, because that's what we are about. 855-515-5550. As you have been listening, we've been talking to Dr. Fobbs, and I have to tell you, I am inspired. I am so inspired. I'm not sure if I could commit an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, but I can start, and I can give a commitment, and I want to learn some of his techniques, and I was wondering, are you interested in that as well? Faith-based healing, is it for you? Tell me a little bit. Tell me about the techniques you have actually with your patients.
We do some
that you have
practice on that.
options for them. Tell me about that.
Well, we have to start somewhere, so we start at the beginning of the technique. And we do it from the standpoint of teaching them how to sit still, how to abide, how to put themselves in a receiving position for the Spirit of God to come in and do its supernatural work. Something that we should actually expect. One of the things we have to tell people is that you have to believe. You do not have to have, Mount Everest belief, but you got to have an element of belief. You have to have faith. Then we can build on that. We can build on that by building a practice of discipline and closeness and repetitive dwelling in God so that His Spirit is constantly feeding you. And so it's a meditative technique, but I really like to call it communion or communion too. There was first communion where we remembered the bread and the wine and the suffering, and now this second communion is the one Jesus invited us to when He said that He'd gone to His Father and He was going to send the Spirit, and He wants you to sit still and dwell in that Spirit and let it feed you and let it transform you, and expect a transfiguration of your own type. And if healing happens to be what you need, that's part of that.
Wow, wow. Now, sitting still for people like me that are hyperactive and love to be energetic
Yes.
is pretty tough, because the first thing when I sit still and I focus, I already have a list next to me, because while I'm in my prayer life and I just, whatever comes to mind, just put it on paper, then I can leave it and get back to prayer.
And that's okay. That's okay.
But how do you get better at that?
Practice and dedication and focus. And also what will happen as you practice and that dedication and focus starts to build experiences. Those experiences will be wonderful because you'll begin to receive the peace of God, and you'll begin to feel the presence of God, and you'll begin to feel things and experience things that will make you no longer feel that not doing it is an option. So I think that it's a matter of practice and building that experiential base.
So tell me a little bit. You sit still, you meditate. Do you read? Do you devote?
I do all that. I like to make it real clear. It's not reading the Bible.
Okay.
It's not singing. Even though reading the Bible and singing are wonderful things. In my healing, I had read the Bible. I had done years and years of Bible study, and I repeated that. I can't sing, so I appropriated the voice of Donnie McKirkin. And, I needed a voice, and so I took his voice. I told him that, by the way, when I met him a couple years ago. And so, so those things are great. But no, this is a time when you close the book, because, reading about mountain climbing, as one of the writers recently said, is not the same as climbing the mountain. So you have to close the book, and then you have to actually start to invite and wait and expect and experience the Spirit coming in.
Wow, that's powerful. Now, Dr. Fobbs, if anybody wants to find out more information about what you do or how to go about that, because you're writing a program for that.
I am, yeah.
Tell me about that. Where do you have a website?
I do, and what I'm doing, it came out of my teaching in my office, because we do this for people with all different types of medical problems in my office. And so I'm going to put those teachings of how to meditate, where to go, what to know, what to hear, what to expect, what to do. I'll just put that on the website as a YouTube video.
Perfect.
And it'll be like being there at our teaching sessions. And that's something we're doing even as we speak.
Perfect.
And we have a website. The website this will be on, the main one will be thesumofalljoy.com.
Perfect.
So, and my practice website is Dr. Fobbs, just drfobbs.com. And we'll have links everywhere. So if you find anything with Fobbs on it, it'll get you there.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming.
You're very welcome.
It was an inspiration.
It was a joy to be here.
And you have inspired me to have a deeper meditating life with the Lord. The hard part is to not.
It is hard.
Start.
It is hard. That's honest.
But yet, when you're there, I remember when I left at the lake at the time, it was refreshingly wonderful.
Yeah.
And then for you, what I like to share for a moment is something out of the Bible that talks about that. Mark 12, starting at verse 22. And it says, "And Jesus answered, saying to them, have faith in God. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart. That's what Dr. Fobbs was talking about. Does not doubt in his heart, but believes that when he says is going to happen, but that believes that what he says is going to happen, it will be granted to him. Therefore I say to you, all things for which you pray and ask, believe that you have received them, and they will be granted to you. Whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father who is in heaven will also forgive you your transgressions. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father. And when I started my quiet time at that time, that 3 hours at the lake, forgiving is how it started. And it was healing, and it was refreshing. And you know what? It's worth it, guys. It's really worth to get to know God better. The closer you draw to Him, the more at peace you are. It's a peace that Dr. Fobbs has talked about, that brought his son safely back because of his commitment. Not just his son, but an entire platoon that had never happened before. That also healed him from cancer. But more of all, most of all, it is affecting every patient as a ripple effect for him being obedient. And my question to you is, will you be obedient to God? I would love for you to call us, to connect with us, and to encourage you. Let's do this together. It's 855-836-1100, or go to barbtv.org. Dr. Fobbs, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
For coming to the show, for helping. And I'd like to give you my book.
Thank you.
Ransomed.
Thank you.
And then, just real quick, for the viewer, do you have any advice that you would like to give them right now?
Other than what we talked about, the one word I didn't mention that I think is so important is vision. You have to have a vision. To heal, you have to have a vision for healing. You have to have a vision and a commitment to reject, the negative things that maybe you heard in the doctor's office or from friends who've had bad outcomes. And you have to accept God's vision, that He is there to heal you.
Wow.
And He certainly has the power.
Thank you so much for that last word. Have a vision, believe in God, know that He's going to make it happen, and follow through at your part. Call us, 855-515-5550, and trust in Him. God loves you, and so do I. Have a great day.